Yeah, very good morning to you, Friday morning. Yeah, in Johannesburg, we are live, myself and Elvis Preslin are on our own today. Morning, Elvis.
Welcome back, Evan. And of course, it's a Friday, and the weekend is around the corner.
Yeah, it was a sad day yesterday. Of course, we laid to rest a very well-known colleague here at SABC News. And it was a very sad funeral, very big funeral, but the show must go on, as they say.
As they say. And today, we focus, of course, on the Deputy President, Cyril Ramaphosa, who criticized big business for their uncompetitive behavior. He's also calling their conduct immoral. Evan.
And so it is. I've got a word for it. I call it corporate gangsterism. Yes, you can quote me on that. That's what we suffer here in South Africa. And therefore, we ask this question on our poll. Those corporate gangsters, those officials, Elvis, found guilty of price fixing and collusion, should they go to prison?
That whole value chain we're talking about, from the CEO right down to your bookkeeper. Should they be held responsible? 149 votes in. So far, 91% of you are saying on the African continent, as well as here in South Africa, that they are guilty and they should go to jail.
If you charge a pensioner double the price, triple the price for a loaf of bread, should you go to prison? I certainly think it should be something that we should consider. 91% are saying, agreeing with us today. Corporate gangsterism should end, Elvis.
Only 9% is not agreeing with us. Bulalani says, yes, if they found guilty, there's no story.
This one from Matthews, Mapuche. He says to us, these people only care about making more money, and they don't care how it affects poor people. They deserve to go to jail for that, says Matthews. No doubt, yes, no doubt. At the moment, they only pay a small fine through the Competition Commission, Elvis, and that fine normally comes out of the massive profits that they
10% of what they really make, Evan, and is that really maybe just a
not even a
on the
slap
wrist?
On the wrist, I tell you. Anyhow, it's at the heart of how we do business in South Africa, and this, of course, is how we have created these monopolies that control our markets.
A few companies that control a market, and that's why we're asking that question. On your screen right now, we would like to know from you, how do we then break up this culture of monopolies in our South African business sector?
70% of South African business is in the hands of 3 or 4 companies. Can you believe that? That's the nature of how we do business right now. Keep tweeting us, keep telling us what you think. Doc Moses, Elvis?
He says, implement RET, radical economic transformation, without fear or favor, nor prejudice. Level the playing fields, punish the cartels, and colluding is corruption. So says Doc Moses.
Yeah, and Kutalo Rudintanga tells us, if we can bring back the spirit of Ubuntu in our country, everybody can admire culture of the other person. Yes, that sounds very nice. But some want to eat, and some want to eat alone, and some want to get too fat, as you saw in that cartoon that we saw there, and that cannot be tolerated. Of course, we're going to deal with the outcomes of the 11th Competition Commission Conference last week. The keynote address was delivered by Cyril Ramaphosa. We'll look back at that, Elvis, and of course, we'll talk to a variety of stakeholders as to how do we tackle this issue.
That's correct, but also on a Friday, when every day we deal with a sports question. The Boks are playing tomorrow, Evan.
Yeah, the Boks are on an upward curve, they tell me, Elvis. And you know, I'm very happy to hear that I've been through the lows with the Springboks in recent times, and at times I don't set my sights too high.
Well, that's why we asked the question, what are your hopes for the Boks against Australia this weekend? The Aussies, well, we're playing in Australia, and Doc Moses says?
It's time. No more choking. Eish, that's a big word to use, man. It's time to get it right. Doc Moses, that's the other one, the Protea one.
Siafana says, I think they're going to play very well. I trust this team. Well, I tell you what, I'm very worried, Evan, because I've seen the comeback of the Australians over the last 2 matches that they played against New Zealand, and I can tell you it's a tough team.
Yeah, they look like a good team. Obviously, spot on point there, but I can also say it looks like this Bok team, they're starting to kind of, something's happening, if one can call it that, within this team, and it kind of looks like it's a very positive thing. Let's hope that we are right.
Thumbs up. But let's get down to business and take a look at your news headlines. Police are searching for suspects following the torching of Uber and meter taxi drivers. And what you see currently is the KZN story that broke yesterday, where we have these ANC KwaZulu-Natal says that they fired the bodyguards assigned to one of the senior officials after a video emerged showing them brandishing guns, as you can see on your screen right now. And then, of course, the Labour Court is to deliver judgment on who is responsible for the legal costs incurred in the case of the SABC 8. Those are all your headlines, but before we get there, let's find out what's happening on the sports front with Eben.
Yeah, obviously it's a busy weekend ahead of us once again, but let's start with the Springboks because it looks like that's going to be a highlight for us this weekend. Yeah, the Springboks, if you don't know, they'll face Australia in a championship clash in Perth tomorrow, midday South African time.
Over recent months, and could see
Then SAFA, they vow to challenge FIFA's order to replay the 2018 FIFA World Cup qualifier between Bafana Bafana and Senegal. And in tennis, Sloane Stephens asks Venus Williams to face compatriot Madison Keys for the US Open title at Flushing Meadows. Well, those are your top sports stories on this Friday. Let's go over to Arvis for the news.
Thank you, Eben. Start off with our top story, and that story we referred to earlier. Police are searching for a group of men after 2 Uber vehicles and a meter taxi were set alight in Sandton, north of Johannesburg last night. According to witnesses, around 15 men believed to be meter taxi drivers petrol bombed the Uber vehicles. The vehicles were parked near the Sandton International Conference Centre, where the Johannesburg Art Festival is being held. Attacks on Uber drivers by the meter taxi drivers who are complaining that they are losing business have escalated in the past few months. In July, an Uber driver died after his car was set alight near the Loftus Versfeld Stadium in Pretoria. The African National Congress in KwaZulu-Natal say that they fired the bodyguards assigned to one of its senior officials after a video emerged showing the men bragging that they would kill someone. The ANC says they asked the private security company to withdraw the guards who were assigned to protect the eThekwini region's provincial secretary, Becky Ntuli.
In the 20-second video, the men are seen hurling insults and making threats. One of the guns shown is an AK-47 rifle. The ANC has confirmed that they are Ntuli's bodyguards. The incident has been widely condemned. As it comes amid tensions in KZN and continued political killings in the province, Ntuli says he cannot be blamed for their behavior.
The security arrangements are privately sourced and security personnel belong to the company assigned the responsibility. It is also impossible for the regional secretary or any other leader, for that matter, to know the conduct and actions of the security or any other personnel that happen or any other action that happened in his or her absence.
The Democratic Alliance says it's alarmed at the footage. It says the ANC must appear before the Murane Commission, which is investigating political killings in KwaZulu-Natal.
The Labour Court in Johannesburg will today deliver judgment on who is responsible for the legal cost incurred in the case of the so-called SABC 8. Trade unions, Bamau and Solidarity have asked the court to hold the former COO of the SABC, Hlaudi Motsoeneng, the former news executive Simon Tabele, and the SABC liable for the cost. The 8 SABC employees were illegally sacked after standing up to censorship at the public broadcaster last year. The SABC said on Wednesday that it was only prepared to pay 10% of the legal costs. The organization's argument is that senior officials should be held liable for their actions. Former COO Hlaudi Motsoeneng, on the other hand, is arguing that he should not be part of the case because an affidavit previously submitted in court did not implicate him. But Motsoeneng's reliance on this affidavit by former news executive Simon Tabele was dealt a blow when Tabele's lawyers asked the court to disregard it. And that is, of course, where we end the news for now. But we're doing a poll and we're conducting that to find out from you the following. Should those officials found guilty of price fixing and price collusion go to jail? Well, so far, there's 156 votes in. There's 22 hours left. And 91% of you are saying, yes, they should go to jail.
Pretty emphatic, Elvis.
Yes, only 9% here, but are suggesting no.
At the moment, the fines are simply too small to really even scare off these business from these kinds of practice in South Africa. But we'll speak to the Competition Commission shortly to find out what's going on. Mbele tells us, starting with the banks in SA, Tiger Brand, cell phone companies, not forgetting Moody's. Well, there's 133 cases, huh?
Well, he's suggesting that Moody should downgrade themselves, it looks like it. And Tugala Rudy and Tanga says, yes, they should go to jail. Well, those are some of your comments, but we're also asking a question, Eben, today that relates almost something similar to this, which is monopoly. Yeah,
the two kind of go hand in hand. They're also mutually exclusive in a way. It's that the question is, how do we change the culture of the way we do business in South Africa? It seems that the only way these businesses know how to do business is to kill the little guy and to put pressure on the little guy. And we know how difficult it is for small business to survive in South Africa. That's why we ask this question on the back of the price fixing and collusion question. Ultimately, those that suffer is the poorest of the poor. Doc Moses tweets us, he says, implement radical economic transformation without fear of favor nor prejudice. Level the playing fields, punish cartels, and colluding is corruption.
Eric says the only way is to allow competition. Monopolies exist due to a lack of alternative suppliers. Now, this counts for SOEs especially. Well, some different comments coming in through there. You can keep them coming during the course of the day because we'd like to get your thoughts on this, Eben.
We allow competition, Elvis. That's the problem. But the big players, because they bully the small players, because they're so big, they come with a sack of money and they simply beat you out of the mix. And what they then do in turn is, well, fix prices amongst themselves. And it really hurts the lowest common denominator, which is those grannies and grandpas who are getting grants, who have to pay double the price for bread, 3 times the price for margarine. These are the kinds of things that really hurt. And to talk about that, 70% of South Africa's economic sector is dominated by 3 or 4 large companies. This was revealed at the recently concluded 11th Competition Law, Economics and Policy Conference, conducted under the theme, The Future of Competition Policy. Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa called for the evolution of the country's competition policy to dismantle economic ownership that is in the hands of just a few. Giving the keynote address at the conference, Ramaphosa took a swipe at huge companies who are accused of anti-competitive behavior, describing them as unfair and even immoral.
Enterprises or corporate enterprises, therefore, have an important role to play in the life of a country, and in South Africa, we would say in the life of our country, because that is precisely what they have played or not played in the past. When organized cabals steal from public resources and unsuspecting consumers, they break trust, they also undermine social cohesion, but in the end they lead to what I would call destroying the lives of ordinary people. When corporate greed, and there is quite a lot of it that goes around, gives rise to price fixing, market division and collusive tendering, governments and citizens alike in the end do become poorer. This is not only unfair, it is also unsustainable. But more than that, it is also immoral. It results in a disproportionate share of economic product that accrues to a narrow group of companies as well as individuals. It reduces the economic contribution of many people whose talents, energies, resources would otherwise have been gainfully employed for the greater social good. Now, anti-competitive behavior prevents economies from ever realizing their potential. One does not even need to write a thesis about this. It is something that is fairly simple and straightforward, which all of us would be aware of. And competition policy in South Africa cannot be limited to merely the promotion of market efficiency or having an introspective look at events such as mergers and acquisitions, and looking at that from a parochial point of view where all it looks at is whether there is a transformational aspect, which is economic empowerment, and that's all. It must be an instrument, this competition policy, that must effect fundamental economic and social change. From the advent of our democracy, we have argued that competition policy has what I would call a pivotal role to play in redressing the injustices of the past. This is what we stated right at the beginning, and me as part of the governing party felt that that is what we needed to do. It was to underline this imperative that in the Competition Act as it is, was crafted a preamble that said apartheid, the system that we had in the past, an iniquitous system, and other discriminatory laws and practices of the past resulted in the excessive concentration of ownership and control within the national economy. It also led to inadequate restraints against anti-competitive trade practices and unjust restrictions on full and free participation in the economy by all South Africans. And we also added that the economy must be open to greater ownership by a greater number of South Africans. Now, this we crafted because we realized that we could utilize competition policy as an instrument to effect the change that is necessary, to whittle down the concentration that was seen in the economy. The governing party realized this as early as the 60s at its various conferences whilst it was in exile. And that is when it spoke about monopolies dominating the economy of our country. And in seeking to do this, it was to say the wealth of our country must be shared amongst all South Africans. And the one way of doing so would be to open up spaces, participation, and areas so that South Africans in their totality can participate freely in their economy through owning the economy, controlling the economy, and also being key managers of economic activity in our country. And this was therefore set out as a major objective. Now, I took the trouble to look at our Competition Act, Commissioner, and found that there's a disjuncture between what is set out in the preamble and what is embodied in the actual act. And it was interesting to read an OECD report which was commenting on our competition environment. And the OECD said, we've set up lofty ideals in terms of having a competition policy that will be transformational, that will change the structure of our economy. And this, the OECD observed, was a product of the past. Product of the past in that the past system that we had, apartheid, so structured our economy that it only favored a particular racial group to be the owners, the controllers of the economy, and it did so by law, by convention, by practice, and by everything else. It is actually an anomalous type of situation, which I guess many people would say they have never seen in many parts of the world, where you make laws and say, only one racial group shall have the right to participate in this area, and you shall not trade in a particular part of the country. You will only be restricted to either the township or rural area and so forth. Market concentration is not good for an economy. An economy that seeks to grow and to thrive and to embrace new technologies, efficiencies, and in the end also consumer satisfaction in the form of prices coming down is an economy that can work much more better and efficiently. And having looked at the OECD report and looked at the American experience, and indeed Europe also caught up onto that. Now, this is something that a competition policy in South Africa needs to look at, to embrace what we have set out in the preamble of our Competition Act and to mesh that into the body of the Act and make the Act alive and make the Act transformational and to respond to the needs of South Africa, because our needs possibly are much greater than the needs that Franklin Delano Roosevelt looked at. He was looking at economic growth, and so are we. We are looking at economic growth, but we are also looking at the inclusion of all our people in economic participation.
That is the main question. How do we change this to get everyone involved, to get the small businesses to grow, etc.? How do we get healthy competition? Well, we are now joined from our Pretoria studios by the Competition Commission's Commissioner, Temenkosi Bonakele, to talk more about, well, some of the outcomes of the 11th Competition Law, Economics and Policy Conference, and also to give us an update on, well, some of the latest investigations on anti-competitive behavior by big business in the country. A very good morning to you, Commissioner, and thank you very much for being with us here on the Newsroom show.
Good morning to you, and thank you for inviting me.
It's great to have you with us. You guys do great work. I want to ask you firstly, maybe we can start with last week, and I'm sure you heard what the Deputy President was addressing. Just give us an overview. What was the outcomes that is important for us to note as a nation from your conference last week?
It was a very important conference, especially as regards to the future of competition laws in South Africa. So firstly, both Minister Patel and Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa and many other speakers acknowledged that the competition authorities in South Africa have been very successful in uncovering cartels and prosecuting abuse of dominance. But there is a persistent problem of concentration. And this is historic. So for an example, whilst currently we look at behavior, so we look at firms that collude or firms that abuse their dominance, many firms are in fact already dominant, and there's very little you can do about that. It's about our history. I mean, if you look at many enterprises here, whether you look at steel or you look at fuel, in telecoms, formerly state-owned enterprises sometimes, but even private sector monopolies that were sanctioned by the state. How do you deal with this now? This was the main issue at the conference, and Minister Patel committed that his government is going to be unveiling before the end of the year measures to deal with concentration in South Africa. And Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa acknowledged that even the OECD has raised concerns about the high levels of concentration in our economy, which frustrates dynamism and growth in the economy. So we can hope that measures will be taken before the end of the year. This will be unveiled on how to address this problem.
You talk about the evolution of the law, which is also, of course, what the Deputy President talked about, the evolution of competition law in South Africa. Is it, we're running a poll and we're asking our viewers what do they think about unscrupulous CEOs and officials who continually do the same thing. So we ask the question, should those officials found guilty of price fixing and collusion, should they be going to jail? Should the law in future look at harsher punishments for these officials who continually offend? What do you say, sir?
I absolutely agree that you need to deter cartels, and part of deterrence is punitive measures, so that those who are engaged in these kinds of things, cartels, they are sent to jail. The good news is actually the law was amended, effective from last year. Being involved in organizing cartels is a criminal offense in South Africa. So we're working very hard with the other criminal prosecuting authorities and the police to make sure that we are eventually able to send people to jail. But that's not the end. There's also the issue of culture. You need diversity in the South African corporate environment, because you have some kind of an old boys club, people very familiar with one another. They socialize together, they go to the same events together, and you are expecting them to compete. If you look at the pool of entrepreneurs in South Africa, and even a pool where we draw directors, is very small. So it's likely that these people will get together and collude. It's very easy. So part of the problem is changing that culture, introducing more people. I can tell you now, it will be very difficult for you to organize, if you are young, 20, organize a cartel with a 50-year-old. Or if you are black, to organize a cartel with white people. Or if you are a woman, to organize a cartel with men. It takes some familiarity for you to be able to do wrong things together.
These days, Chief, they're on the same WhatsApp groups. That's where we are in the South Africa of today.
Yes, of course.
I want to get serious.
We know that some of them...
Carry on.
I was going to tell you that we have examples where people pray before they start colluding. We have examples where people go to horse racing events before they have a cartel meeting. So you can see that the platforms are there for them to do these things.
Chief, you are informing me quite a bit today. I want to talk about quickly, you can give us an update about the break-in that we had there at your offices. I'm very worried about this kind of behavior when we see the pushback that's coming. What's the latest?
Well, we are investigating this. I cannot reveal much about that, except to also agree with you that we are very worried about it. As a result, we have tightened our security in our premises. We have always had an open door policy because we want people to be able to walk into our offices and report cases. But obviously, we have to balance that now with what we are seeing, which is that people are keen to break in and take our computers. So we're quite worried, but I think that it's under control.
Can you give us a quick heads up over some of the big cases you are looking at? Just a quick update, some of the ones that have been in the media. There are quite a few. I know you guys got 133 cases you're looking at all across, but some of the big ones that are in the media, if you can just give us a quick heads up.
Well, on banking, for an example, we referred the case in February. We are still waiting for answers from the banks. Many of the banks raise technical issues to say, we are foreign banks, we did this in the US, and therefore you don't have jurisdiction. Some of them said, we want more information for you to be, for us to be able to answer. We are dealing with all of those interlocutory applications, and really our call is that this is not going to go away. We need the banks to answer. So that's where we are there. We will see how it goes with all the challenges they are putting forward. We have a couple of cases that are going to be heard by the tribunal, abuse of dominance case against CompuTicket, which forces everybody who has a concert to have an exclusive contract in order for them to sell tickets. So that's an interesting case which is going to be heard before the end of the year. And there's a lot of collusion cases, furniture removal cases that are also coming up for hearings. And then there are new investigations, fairly new investigations. We've raided firms recently that install fire detection equipment in the buildings, for new buildings and even old buildings. We have found an extensive cartels there that covers more than 20 firms that are involved. Recently, you might have seen we've referred a case against the furniture removal company, and they are facing more than 600 charges for that. And we think that there is momentum, particularly towards against cartels. And one last thing, maybe I will say, linking up to what you said earlier. We are now taking a few of these cases where we are able to identify individuals who were involved in setting up the cartels and colluding. And we would be referring these individuals to the NPA, particularly those who don't cooperate with the competition authorities during investigations.
Mr. Commissioner, thank you. We've run out of time, but thank you very much for giving us a heads up today. I hope that you can at some point put these corporate gangsters in jail, because they are hurting the lowest common denominator in South Africa, which is our poor people and our grannies and our grandfathers with some of the most basic items. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now that was the Commissioner of the Competition Commission, Temengosi Bonakele, telling us the concerning thing that he said there is that they're discovering more and more sectors and more firms being involved in this kind of thing. Now, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk to the Black Business Council. They're here to talk about this problem that we are facing with as a nation.
Imran Tahir produced a superb performance with the ball. The Proteas leg spinner put his side in the driving seat, scalping 3 wickets for just 18 runs.
Gifton Gope is flying toward third, and he is there with a triple, his first in the big leagues.
It is a Ferrari front row lockout, unless Hamilton can get on pole, and he can't. Ferrari, for the first time since France in 2008, have locked out the front row.
For all your sports news, keep it locked to Sports Live every Saturday and Sunday from 20:30.
Why is there a dispute over who is the rightful heir to the throne?
What I can say is that Masindi is a woman. She's a girl child. Because I think that if she was a male, there's no way that anybody was going to dispute the fact that she is the rightful heir.
Do you recognize her as your rightful heir?
Yeah, no, I will definitely say that she is my daughter. She grew up there.
What is the intention?
I want my throne.
Join me, Mpotsedu, live every Monday to Thursday at 17:30.
Staying with the outcomes of the 11th Competition Law, Economic and Policy Conference, the Deputy President, you heard him there, Cyril Ramaphosa, called for big business to make space for black-owned companies, especially small and medium enterprises. Now, a recent study conducted by Bloomberg revealed that 8 out of 10 businesses in South Africa fail within the first 18 months of their existence. Now, to discuss the challenges faced by small and medium enterprises and how the uncompetitive behavior by big business affect them, we're now joined in studio by George Sebulela. He's the Secretary General of the Black Business Council. In short, it is the BBC, but it's not the channel that we know. Sir, first and foremost, we heard in our previous interview with the Competition Commission about prayers before collusive meetings. What is your sense out of this? Because we understand that 70% of South Africa's economic sector is dominated and controlled by 3 or 4 big companies in this country.
Look, let me firstly acknowledge the work that the Competition Commission is doing. Indeed, we have seen a lot of progress. One of the arguments that we have raised before, during the time of the construction collusion, we have raised an issue of us being concerned that I think the penalty was quite very light. But I want to bring a context to the discussion. I think the DP has explained it quite clearly. But what we miss in the process is the same argument that we have raised on the SONA speech by the president of the country. This research covers that, but in a nutshell, if you think that the president had said 90% of the economy is owned by only 10% of the economy, of the people in the economy.
Which is the majority.
Which is the majority. So, but what was the most important thing, and then he went further to say, this is where radical economic transformation kicks in. To say, how do you address this situation? We can talk about them. I mean, we can debate these issues. But unless you have changed the structure and the ownership and the patterns of this economy, we would not be able to move. Just to give you an example, if you look in the year 2000, the same companies that were on top 20 of the JSE, literally in 2016, they were still on those 12 companies that are still on the top 20 of the JSE. That already clarifies that there's no shift in the movement of the economy. It's still owned by the same companies. What causes that is mergers and acquisition transactions. So there's no clear opportunity of new development for manufacturing and other players coming into the industry. And that's where the difficulty comes in. And I had a very interesting reading, which was a research done by the University of Johannesburg Center for Competition, Regulation and Economic Development. They said, South African companies are accumulating reserves and not investing in the economy, while acquisition-led growth has increased concentration and led to anti-competitive behavior. Now, when we talk about the PPPFA, to say there is no way we can see transformation for procurement, for black business, is because of the pricing issue. And that's the collusion comes in. That's where collusion comes in. Because the same few large companies will collude, they'll price fix, they will beat you on price.
Now, we're asking our viewers today, how do we then break this culture of monopolies in the South African context in the business sector?
Well, firstly, we have to transform the top 100 listed companies. We have to advance and ensure that organizations like PIC must come to the fore in creating a lot of black funds that can begin to transform these companies. That's number one. The second thing is we talked about black industrialization. The quicker and the faster we accelerate black industrialization program, the more we bringing black industries coming, black operators and industrialists coming into the fore. The second thing is it is very quite critical to make sure that you capacitate organization like the National Empowerment Fund, if they're not properly capitalized, then you have no funding to be able to bring those industrialists into the fore. The second thing is we have to ensure, the third thing, we have to ensure that this procurement policies must be fast-tracked to ensure that there's fast-tracking of black participation in that procurement spend.
Black economic empowerment was a driving force, and it seems like it's not working. So what do we then do in this case? In relation to collusion, these firms are being fined 10% of their gross profits. Yeah. Is that sufficient enough to really nip this practice in the butt of collusion in general?
Well, we must set an example. Obviously, if people are involved in those kinds of behaviors, firstly, I say the law must take its course. They must be charged with criminal charges. They must go to jail. That's the first thing. The second thing is if we're going to say 10%, I personally think we have to recover the total amount of money that was found in a collusion behavior, because we are able to calculate what would have cost the state in that particular aspect.
As the voice of black business in the country, from the BBC's perspective, the Black Business Council, what are some of the challenges that black business face, and how do we overcome it as black business?
Well, firstly is you need a platform that is equal for industries to be able to play. You can't play in an area where the level field is not equal. That's number one. Number two is we have to make sure that as we bring this black business come into those opportunities, the policies that are put in place can be able to fast-track easier participation for those businesses. We have seen recently, for example, in the chicken industry, the rainbows of this world dominate. When some of our members come to us and say, at the time when our market is growing because we play at the distribution level, these people will say, we don't have enough stock to supply. In a nutshell, it means you can't trade as a distributor. And those are the challenges that we have. We must also make sure that when government has instituted policies with penalties, those penalties must be enforced quite strongly.
A recent study also revealed that 8 out of 10 businesses here in South Africa don't survive within the 18-month period. Now, that is normally the sort of space that you track a business to see whether there's growth potential or not. How do we then overcome that sort of thing, and what are some of the contributing factors? Is collusion and monopoly part and parcel of that?
Well, firstly, there's two key things that makes a business successful. Firstly, you need to have adequate funding, whether it's working capital funding for that business. The second thing is you need enough market. By market, we don't say the size of the market, but the contracts that could be made available for that business. It doesn't make sense when you have formed a business, you don't have enough capital and you don't have the opportunities to be able to expose your services or capabilities of your products. And I think the challenge is there. Hence, we say if we capacitate the funding that is available and at the same time we create markets to be available for those companies, the chances of those businesses succeeding is quite high. Yes, there are softer issues that could be available like mentoring and coaching, but business, by way of where it starts, the ground is just the funding and the opportunities.
Mr. Sebalela, I thank you so much for your time, sir, and joining us here in studio.
Thank you so much.
We're going to talk a lot more about this because it's all about business and how we do grow our size of the market and how do we stop monopolies. That's all part and parcel of our question today. You can participate in the question as well as in the poll. We'd like to find out from you, do these people have to go to jail? Yes? That's the question. But let's now go over to Eben to take a look at our trends on social media.
Yeah, it's interesting, these questions of us. Nice interview that, by the way. Tougher punitive measures, but the law, the competition law in South Africa is evolving, as you saw from what we've been doing the last a little bit. Now, in the next hour, I'll speak to Transform South Africa's Adil in Chabalang about exactly those issues as well. But let's just go onto our Facebook page so you can see what we've got there today. The African National Congress in KwaZulu-Natal says it's deeply concerned about the circulating video of bodyguards of its regional secretary, Bregan Thuli, brandishing an AK-47 and 2 other pistols. Now, it's since confirmed that the 2 bodyguards have been fired. Then, Parktown Boys High School polo coach, who faces a string of charges, including sexual assault and grooming children for sexual activity, is due to appear in the High Court in Johannesburg for a pre-trial hearing. Finally, the alcohol industry uses denial, distortion and distraction to mislead people about the risks of developing cancer from drinking, often employing similar tactics to those of the tobacco industry. This is according to a latest study. Looks like we're going to have to do an entire show on that one shortly. That's on our Facebook page. You can also go to the website, sabc.co.za/news. Quick roundup of newspapers from around the world. Let's have a look at what's happening elsewhere now. In New York, the Times reports that North Korea fired a ballistic missile over northern Japan this week, prompting the government in Tokyo to warn residents in its path to take cover and leading to another round of questions about whether war will soon strike the Korean peninsula. Then in Australia, the Australian says a new clash looms over the postal vote on same-sex marriage as the Turnbull government holds urgent talks to set new rules on the claims that can be made on either side of the 8-week debate, triggering fears the strict campaign laws would shut down free speech in Australia. Then the South China Morning Post reports that China has given its strongest sign yet that it will support tougher sanctions on North Korea, with Foreign Minister Wang Yi saying yesterday that the United Nations Security Council had to take steps to rein in Pyongyang. Time for us to take a short commercial break. We're talking about price fixing and collusion. Don't forget to send us your tweets on our question of the day. Should tougher punitive measures is our poll? Go vote on the poll as well. Time for a break. We'll be back shortly.
An exciting opportunity and an absolute must for those with the spirit of adventure is a Kruger Park night game drive.
The railway station itself is already a sight to behold and offers gracious colonial-style buildings and serves as the departure and arrival point for all train journeys.
I wanted to dress with my best color. Being awarded to do the Superintendent Pavilion is the highest commission in my career. And I wanted just to come and show me with my best clothes, and that is blue.
Catch Trends Travel every Sunday from 12 to 1 for all the global travel and leisure trends.
Hello and a warm welcome to PM News, and we're broadcasting live from Johannesburg.
4 decades later, the family is still seeking closure.
We need the truth, and the truth must be told.
Children often go undiagnosed because they are hidden away. About 1 million people in South Africa live with autism.
Creative recycling at play.
Mosaic has been around forever. I just had to find a new, fresh way to put and a new spin to put on it. So I decided why not recycled cans.
Stay tuned to PM News for all your news updates every Saturday and Sunday from 1500 hours.
Welcome back. You're watching the Newsroom show. Today we're dealing with collusion, price fixing and all of those things that deal with monopolies in South African business. But let's go onto social media now and have a look at what you can interact with there. Of course, we start with the hashtag Uber, and this is the pictures from last night. Fighting broke out against meter taxi drivers, between metered taxi drivers and Uber drivers in Sandton CBD last night. Cars were set alight, allegedly with petrol bombs. No arrests, however, have been made as the fighting continued in the main business center in Sandton.
They're burning another one around.
Then the big story of today, of course, bodyguards in KwaZulu-Natal have now been fired after a video emerged of the men, well, talking about killing somebody. This, of course, is in bad taste, they say, with all the political killings going on in the province that is KwaZulu-Natal. ANC KZN, that is the hashtag going about. In the United States, although Hurricane Irma may look beautiful from the sky, it's causing havoc on the ground. It passed through the Caribbean yesterday, tearing down the Holiday Islands and killing more than 10 people. Hurricane Jose is also on the move, traveling at around 300 kilometers an hour right behind. This mega storm is on its way to Haiti, a nation that have always been ill-prepared, it seems, for these hurricanes with up to 300 kilometer an hour winds. Hurricane Irma is what you can have a look at. And if a series of hurricanes and floods aren't bad enough for the Americans down south, a magnitude 8.4 earthquake has now struck the coast of southern Mexico. I think you saw that. A tsunami warning has also been issued there. Hashtag is earthquake if you want to go and have a look at it. Now, a picture of the day. This one comes from Mr. Manyonga. Now, and it's captioned 25 years on from this and not yet Uhuru, the Bishu massacre. This is a picture from that fateful day. We shall never forget. Long live the spirit of Chris Hani. Long live. Now for our comment of the day, of course, this one comes from Ben Not Netanyahu. He calls himself an Israeli, and he talks about a heritage of oppressing and discriminating another race. That's not something to be proud of, nor give you goosebumps. Of course, this, is in reaction to an apartheid sympathizer yesterday who was brandishing an old flag and said, looking at the old flag gave her goosebumps. Can you get your head around that? I said you cannot. Anyhow, take a look at what's in the courts. We'll start in Port Elizabeth today, where the Nigerian pastor Timothy Omotoso is expected to appear in the Port Elizabeth Magistrates Court for his bail application. Omotoso faces 22 charges that include contravening the Sexual Offences Act and rape, as well as 5 counts of contravening the Immigrations Act. Then up here in Johannesburg, the Labour Court will today deliver judgment on who's responsible for the legal costs incurred in the case of the so-called SABC. It's one that will, well, certainly keep us interested here in the workplace. Those are developments within the courtrooms, but we look a bit forward on Monday. Well, we'll take a look at road rage in South Africa. Do we really have some of the angriest drivers in the world? Well, that's what the statistics say. We have some of the angriest drivers on the road. Why are we so angry? We'll try and speak to a variety of stakeholders about our anger issues. Yeah, Elvis, I certainly see a lot of angry people on the roads, I can tell you that.
Well, that's what we're going to look at on Monday, Eben. It's a developing story. I mean, it's not the first time that we talk about it here. And somebody asked me earlier, are we the most angriest nation, especially on our roads? And certainly not, but there's a very angry, a lot of angry motorists on the roads as such.
You're in the top 5.
Yeah.
Which is bad enough, I think.
Bad enough.
But let's hope the Boks can get back to number 1.
Now that is the big question. That's tomorrow against the Aussies. And of course, there's not much change in the side as such, we understand. Handré Pollard, for me, I believe, is back in the squad since 2015. That was the last time he was in.
Yeah, for me, it's an interesting one, the fact that they're picking Handré Pollard. I know he's a big favorite of Alistair Coetzee, and he really rates him. And let's not forget, he was a World Player of the Year at under 20 level and so forth. But he hasn't played any rugby this season, and therefore, you know, anyone who understands sport knows that you need 7 or 8 games to get to real match fitness. So maybe he's going to bring him in sort of bit part kind of role, and let's hope it comes off. But I know that, as you said earlier, the Aussies are certainly back, and they look like they're playing some good stuff.
Well, that's why we're asking you the question, what's your hopes for the Springboks this weekend against the Aussies? And there's one of the tweets, Eben. Nkutalo says, hoping for a win. That's all. Unlike 2-1.
People. Leave Bafana alone now. They've been bashed, man. Alex Motapo tells us, let's cross fingers for a win. Yes, South Africa, we love a winner, and let's back them.
Bulalani says, we don't need to cross fingers because they will win. We will we will only in Bafana. What is that? Ole? We will. Well, we believe in Bafana, but Bafana lost, of course. And there's a problem with Bafana, by the way. Yeah. FIFA now is not going to stand still and just accept that Bafana has to replay Senegal.
Yeah, it looks like they want to go into the courts now to not replay this one. You know, this ref has been found guilty of quite a lot of impropriety, and he oversaw that match. And sometimes I think you should just let the law take its course. This kind of litigation is very expensive, and let's hope SAFA has the money for this kind of thing.
Well, I believe the argument that FIFA is putting forward is that they did not appoint the referee. It comes from FIFA, so they must take the blame for it. It's not Bafana's problem as such.
Changing of the guard at the US Open, I saw quite like that. It was Sloane Stephens beating Venus Williams, the young prodigy now finally coming through and reaching the final. That was fantastic.
That was absolutely fantastic.
Going to play compatriot
yes.
Madison Keys.
I really thought that Venus will get to the top there, but well done though to the young American there coming through, Stephen. So hopefully we see a new protege there. I was also very interested in this particular segment. There was the young Japanese Osaka.
Yeah, she certainly looks like she's got a great future ahead of her.
Yes,
no doubt. But yeah, this was an interesting changing of the guard in a way, and two Americans in the final at the US Open should be great.
That's fantastic, yes. Well, that's where we got to leave it for now. We'll take a short break, but we'll be back right at the top of the hour with some more, and we continue our discussion on collusion and price fixing and monopoly. Not the monopoly that we play at home. Monopoly.
With the stories of abuse from the other 8, but they haven't been ready to pursue any angles. They've offered their support, they've offered the comfort to the 8, and it's been an amazing journey.
It feels like your heart actually literally sunk in your shoes.
It wasn't a long encounter. I think at the time I froze.
The way the criminal justice system deals with sexual violence is problematic. And I don't know, unless there's a fundamental change in many things, the way prosecutors deal with the victim in the matter.
For all investigative insights, stay tuned to Special Assignment every Saturday at 17:30.
What guides us?
Is it something you can see? Hear? Feel? Or touch? What leads us onto greater experiences? Is it the words of our sacred texts? The advice of our elders? Or is it the actions of our people? The strength of our beliefs? Or the voices of our citizens? Your country is guided by the voices of its people, and your broadcaster is dependent on your voice to guide it. Get your copy of the SABC's editorial policy and have your say.
Welcome back. Yeah, Man Alone, 10 o'clock Central African time. Nice to be with you here on the Newsroom show. Of course, today we're focusing on fixing, price fixing. That is collusion and, of course, monopolistic behavior. Now, Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa criticized big business for their uncompetitive behavior last week. He went as far as to say that the conduct is immoral. So we're asking you this question: how do we deal with it? Should those found guilty of price fixing and collusion, should they go to jail? Well, a new punitive framework is being investigated as we speak. 92% of 190 of you that have voted are saying yes, an emphatic yes, to send unscrupulous CEOs, board members to jail if they fix prices and hurt the poor. This one from Michael Sitoli. He says yes, but that's not enough. Asset freezing and auctioning those assets is the way to go. Hit them hard in their pocket, says Michael, where it matters the most. Lechasa says yes, simply they should go to jail. Yep, that's our focus. Of course, we take it a little bit further and we're talking about the monopolistic culture that exists within business in South Africa. Yes, 3 or 4 businesses own 70%. 70%! That is certainly an underlining of how monopolistic business in South Africa has become. So we ask you the question: how do we break the culture of monopolies in the South African business sector? There you see the gist of that in the cartoon that we've put forward. Of course, at the cost of small business, that's what it is. 80% of all small businesses that start in South Africa die within 18 months because it's so difficult for them to survive. This one from Onuke Christian, who says, pump money. But where do we pump the money, Onuke? Colin Mabuza tells us, educate and promote young entrepreneurs' business in a fair and equal platform for all. And implement, he says. Implementation, in certainly, that's the one. Yep. Shortly I'll speak to Transform South Africa as well about this issue that we face within business. But the Boks are playing the weekend, and of course they're showing signs of getting back to the top of the world now. Facing Australia tomorrow in what some will say will be the first acid test, the first big acid test. What are your hopes, we ask you? Let's have a look at what you guys are telling us. Success with victory, says Onuke. Yes, we love a winner, Onuke. That's South Africans. Vimbe Keys says to us, victory is ours. Hashtag Springboks. Yeah, nice positive attitude that we have coming through on our social platforms. Keep tweeting us and keep sending us questions for, of course, price fixing, collusion and monopolistic culture. We're going to do that. But first, let's take a look at the top news right now. Police continue their search for suspects following the torching of Uber and meter taxis in Sandton last night. The ANC has moved and sacked gun-toting KwaZulu-Natal bodyguards. And the Labour Court will shortly deliver its judgment on who is responsible for the legal costs incurred in the case of the SABC Act. Of course, in sports, the Springboks will face Australia in a championship clash in Perth tomorrow. Then SAFA have vowed to challenge FIFA's order to replay the 2018 FIFA World Cup qualifier between Bafana Bafana and Senegal. Then in tennis, Sloane Stephens ousts Venus Williams and will face compatriot Madison Keys for the US Open title. Now, President Jacob Zuma is expected to launch the Invest SA one-stop shop in the Western Cape shortly, as you can see from these live pictures. Now, that is set to provide strategic guidance, reduce regulatory inefficiencies and reduce red tape for investors. For more on this story, we are joined in Cape Town by Mandalisi Dubase. Very good to you. Very good morning to you, Mandalisi. Just give us an idea what's happening there.
Eben, you could have just seen the president joined by other dignitaries, including the mayor of Cape Town, opening this Invest SA one-stop shop. Just in brief, Eben, because the president is already here, these are the investment shops that are aimed at making easy to do business in South Africa and making it cheaper to make business in South Africa. They are aimed at coordinating all the economic special zones around the country. So this is the first one to be open, and there will be two others that will be open in Johannesburg and Durban. And the aim is to encourage economic growth and to start growing the economy and encourage foreign direct investment in the country. Eben?
Mandalisi, I see the president is there with Patricia de Lille and so on. What else is happening there today?
Eben, I will come back to you. We are just moved quickly by the security personnel.
Well, let's just stay with those live pictures. Let's stay with those live pictures. Let's have a look. Let's have a look at what those over-anxious security guards are busy with. Yeah, whenever the president is in Cape Town, I suppose, it's a massive event. There you see, oh, we cut away from it again, unfortunately. There you see the president doing the pleasantries, opening this Invest SA one-stop shop, along with Patricia de Lille, the mayor of Cape Town, also known affectionately as Auntie Pat. There you go. Very nice. How to make investment a little bit easier. Interesting that this would happen in Cape Town, talking about reducing regulatory inefficiencies and reducing red tape for all investors. Isn't it ironic that the red tape was just cut? There. Mandalisi, are you still with us?
Can you move this side, guys? Mom, move this side.
Mandalisi, are you back? Well, there you see the president quite enjoying his time in Cape Town, waving at dignitaries. I'm sure there's lots of members of the public doing the handshakes as you do. Well, Cape Town is open for business, and South Africa is well open for business. President has just explained to the president the work that they will do at this one-stop shop. As you heard a little bit earlier, Mandalisi Dubase pointed out that this is the first of three. Two others will be opened elsewhere in the country. I couldn't get the locations from Mandalisi as to where those will be taking place. But there you see President Jacob Zuma. I'm now told that, well, they will be open in Durban as well as here in the city of Gold, Johannesburg. The Invest SA one-stop shops opened by the president to make it easier to get money into our economy. Now, Mandalisi is back, I'm told. Mandalisi, just run us through the program. What else is going to happen there today?
Even you are cutting, but I think I've get the gist of your question, that what else is going to happen after the opening of this one shop, one... Hello, Ebert?
Yes, I'm here. Yeah, Mandalisi, we're having great difficulty. We're having great difficulty. As you can see, it's indoors in a confined space, so it's very difficult there to get an update. But we got the gist of it. It's a one-stop shop for us here in South Africa. One of three that will, well, make sure that we get more money, external money, through investment into our economy. We'll try and get back to Mandalisi at the top of the next hour maybe to give us an update as to the work that they are doing. But of course, our top story at this hour, police are searching for a group of men after 2 Uber vehicles and a metered taxi were set alight in Sandton, north of Johannesburg last night. Now, according to witnesses, around 15 men believed to be metered taxi drivers petrol-bombed the Uber vehicles. The vehicles were parked near the Sandton International Conference Centre, where the Johannesburg Art Festival is being held. Now, attacks on Uber drivers by metered taxis or metered taxi drivers who are complaining that they're losing business have escalated around the country in the past few months. In July, an Uber driver died after his car was set alight near the Loftus Versfeld Stadium in Pretoria, with him still inside. Now, the Department of Transport has condemned the arson, intimidation and violence between Uber and metered taxi drivers. Transport spokesperson Ishmael Mnisi says if the warring parties do not stop these acts of violence, it will suspend the operations and allow the law to take its course. He was speaking on our sister program Morning Live a little bit earlier today.
We met with them not once but several times, indicating to them the importance of upholding the law, the importance of upholding the conditions of the permits that we're giving them. Because remember, when we issue a permit to operators, there are rules and regulations there, and amongst them is that they need to seize any acts of their intimidation and violence and operate within the confines of that permit. Failure for them to do so then gives us the right to withhold or to withdraw that permission, or to even officially cancel it if such an operator does not comply with the law. However, as we are saying that the room of engagement is still there with them, and it is at the point where we feel that such engagement have been exhausted. Now we then need to come with punitive measures to seize all the operations of these up until we bring them to the discussion table and this violence is stopped immediately.
Now, the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal says they have fired the bodyguards assigned to one of its senior officials after a video emerged showing the men bragging that they would kill somebody. The ANC says they asked the private security company to withdraw both these guards who were assigned to protect the eThekwini region's provincial secretary, Begintuli.
In the 20-second video, the men are seen hurling insults and making threats. One of the guns shown is an AK-47 rifle. The ANC has confirmed that they are Ntuli's bodyguards. The incident has been widely condemned. As it comes amid tensions in KZN and continued political killings in the province, Ntuli says he cannot be blamed for their behavior.
The security arrangements are privately sourced and security personnel belong to the company assigned the responsibility. It is also impossible of the security or any other personnel that happen or any other action that happened in his or her absence.
The Democratic Alliance says it's alarmed at the footage. It says the ANC must appear before the Murane Commission, which is investigating political killings in KwaZulu-Natal.
The Nigerian pastor Timothy Omotoso, who is facing charges under the Sexual Offences and Immigration Acts, will hear if he's granted bail in the Port Elizabeth Magistrates Courts today. Omotoso brought a second bail application after appointing a new legal team, but during the bail hearing, the state added 5 counts of contravening the Immigrations Act. He's been incarcerated since his dramatic arrest by the Hawks at the Port Elizabeth Airport in April. Congregants of the Jesus Dominion International Church have again gathered outside the court, singing songs in support of their pastor. For an update, let's quickly cross to our reporter, Lerato Tipa. Very good morning to you, Lerato. What do we expect?
Well, even the congregants that were chanting songs in the morning have since left. If you just take a look just behind me, you'll see ladies of the Women's League actually celebrating. And why? Tim Omotoso has been denied bail for the second time at the PE Magistrate Court. So different scenes to what we saw this morning with people from Jesus Dominion Church celebrating and obviously standing with their pastor. But just a few minutes after that, we went inside court and actually heard that for the second time, this alleged sexual offender who faces 29 charges has actually been denied bail. But joining me this morning, tell us more about what happened in court is the NPA spokesperson, Tshepo Ndwalaza. Mr. Ndwalaza, Tim Omotoso being denied bail for the second time, mainly because the magistrate is saying there's no new evidence brought forward.
Yes, indeed. We are very satisfied with the decision that has been taken today, as we believe that we were able to convince the court as the NPA that indeed this man must not get bail. We were also very skeptical about the fact that they were saying they have new facts. And in fact, we believed that there were no new facts at all. It was just a matter of them reshuffling what was in the first bail application. And as the NPA, we are satisfied with the decision, and we believe that justice has been served.
The magistrate also saying that she doesn't believe that he is here legally, and that was one of the main things that she brought forward inside court today.
Yes, that was another case which we also brought forward sometime last week when we came in, and the court has also ruled that he must face charges on that, and the DPP will make a decision on that, and we will meet again on the 1st of November, where the decision will have been made on whether to prosecute or not in this other case.
The defense also tried to say that obviously he's a man of the cloth, he serves the community, gives bread to the poor, serves his church, but also that's not enough to convince the magistrate not to give him bail.
Well, there should be exceptional circumstances where such a bail could be given in such situations. And in this case, they did try to come forward with all the philanthropic attempts that he makes in various communities. But that was not something that they brought forward in the first bail application. That was the question of the court. Why didn't they come up with that information from when the bail application was done the first time? Didn't they know that there were these philanthropic efforts for the man in the first bail application? And the court is not convinced at all, and we believe that the court has vindicated us.
Avicii, for the second time for the state, do you still believe you guys have a strong case in this matter?
Well, we believe that he's got a case to answer in a court of law, and these are Schedule 6 offences, which are very serious offences, and he has to face them.
Well, that was the NPA spokesperson, Tshepo Ndwalaza, just reacting what was said in court this morning, that Pastor Tim Omotoso being denied bail for the second time. Magistrate Tandeka saying that the most thing is that the defence failed to produce new evidence. So he'll remain in court, he'll remain in custody up until the 1st of November. For now, it's back to you in studio.
Thank you very much, Lerato. Yes, Tim Omotoso denied bail for a second time there. Well, he's considered a flight risk. Thanks to Lerato Tipa for that update right there on the court side as the news broke. Anyhow, we stay in the courts, but we go to the Labour Court here in Joburg, where today or shortly they'll deliver judgment on who's responsible for the legal costs incurred in the so-called case of the SABC 8. Now, trade unions, Bamahu and Solidarity, they've asked the court to hold former COO Hlaudi Mutsweneng, former news executive Simon Tebele, as well as the SABC, liable for the costs. The 8 SABC employees were illegally sacked after standing up to censorship at the public broadcaster last year. Now, the SABC said in turn that it was only prepared to pay 10% of the legal costs. The organization's argument is that senior officials should be held liable for their actions. We'll tell you what happens in court, or what happened in court, as soon as the news comes out. That judgment is underway right now. Of course, we're dealing with price fixing, collusion and the monopolistic culture of business in South Africa. Now, recently, news has dominated headlines of collusive and uncompetitive behavior. Corporations have been accused of manipulating the price of the rand, while retailers have been accused of price fixing. Some of the observers have blamed this on the slow pace of transformation or even the complete lack thereof. Now, to discuss this a little bit further, in studio, the president of Transform RSA, Adil Nchabeleng. Adil, a very good morning to you, and thanks for being with us.
Good morning, Ibn. Thank you so much.
Now, I know that you followed this very closely, and you followed the conference last week where they talk about evolving competition law in South Africa. Is that something that you support?
Look, the evolution of competition law is critical and necessary. But, I mean, we are not seeing anything tangible coming out of strict prosecution of price fixing as well as collusion behavior within the marketplace. I mean, these are companies that are costing the industry in billions by just colluding over an aspect. For instance, salt. In South Africa, you have a collusion practices whereby the producers as well as the distributors and the manufacturers of salt are in agreement on prices as well as how to do distribution. So it's an uncompetitive environment. That is just but one sector. We're looking at the retail industry where the food particularly, you have collusion in margarine production, you have collusion in oils production, you have collusion in terms of flour production, where actually producers go into an agreement to say, this is how we are going to enter markets. As much as we are competitors, we still have an advantage because we can agree on how we are going to determine prices in the market. We can agree on how we are going to be determining issues with regards to distribution and who gets what piece of the pie. I mean, that's quite criminal and it has to be prosecuted. But we are not seeing criminal prosecutions brought up against the directors as well as being given fiduciary duty. And it's quite reckless, whereby you can find somebody at 10% and yet you disagree when government personnel take 10% for some of their, impropriety activities. Yeah. So you're encouraging one thing on the one side, and on the other side, you actually criminalize it. So it doesn't really make sense. Yeah. These companies have to be brought to book. And it's about time that we really start breaking down these collusion practices. And people who are colluding must be sent to jail. Simple as that.
I want to show you what our viewers are saying. They agree 100% with you. Let's have a look at that poll that we've been running since this morning to get people to vote on it. More than 200 votes in already on this. Should those officials found guilty of price fixing and collusion, should they go to prison? Well, more than 90% are saying yes. But is prison enough?
Look, prison is not enough. You have to shut down these companies. We have cartels in the construction industry that have taken advantage of the one project, which was the 2010 stadium building project, where they all agreed on one price. I mean, all stadiums cannot cost one price. And the same cartel industry as well as operators from the top 5 construction companies, none of them have ever seen jail time. None of them have just been, I mean, even their CEOs, some of them were just moved around and shifted around. A lot of payouts were given, and the same contracts are still enjoying the dominance of the economy and the marketplace in terms of construction industry. According to our view, from a Transform RSA point of view, we're saying these companies, one, must be shut down. Secondly, their directors must be criminalized, like what they did in the Enron matter. Enron is not here today because why? The U.S. government Department of Justice took a decisive decision, and we're saying we are going to prosecute, we are going to criminalize, and we are going to shut down this particular kind of operators so that you have a proper, competitive, free from collusion marketplace. South Africa's economy is completely ridden by collusion from all sectors of the particular, public market.
Yeah, there's 133 cases in all sectors before the Competition Commission, which should be, which it should really be the biggest story in South Africa.
But it can't be the biggest story. You're criminalizing a cartel of white men who have done this for years immemorial, and nobody has ever taken up any step against them. And this is what is unacceptable. If it was done, by the way, if there was a collusion, for instance, in a particular sector of the industry that is dominated by black people, you would not have this kind of a reaction. They would have by now been taken to court, they would have been by now been taken to task, and that particular collusive behavior would have been stopped. So from that point of view, we are saying very clearly that the aspect of radical economic transformation will not happen in South Africa unless government starts taking decisive measures. It does not matter across the rainbow color line who gets into a collusive behavior. Everyone who colludes must be criminally prosecuted, must be given proper jail time, must be made to face the law as it is, and must actually lose operational licenses as well as privileges.
I spoke to the competition commissioner a little bit earlier, and he told me it's you know, it's along race, it's along age groups, it's along sex, it's along all these kind of dynamics, and those need to be untangled. But we live in the time of the same WhatsApp group. How do we untangle this kind of behavior then?
How was apartheid dismantled in South Africa? It was by the same sheer force and magnitude of people on the ground, ordinary people, the viewers out there, saying that it's about time our economy transforms. Because transformation is not going to be something that we need to still negotiate in an environment where we have massive economic challenges. Remember, collusive behavior results in a way whereby the economy is actually made stagnant, prices are hiked to the highest level, and entrants are actually prohibited from participating. We were just looking at one case, for instance, a case of farmers as well as market, people who in the marketplace, where farmers cannot take their produce to the marketplace, where like City Deep and the other markets, Pretoria markets, where they can actually get competitive prices. You have big farmers colluding in the morning to sell their produce at the lowest price and scale it down, and then during the day, they have the other emerging farmers selling at a lesser, higher price, and they don't even get competitive pricing in between. So they are actually driven out strategically out of a market through the collusive behavior that is currently taking place. That's just but one aspect of it. Every sector in South Africa has collusion. I mean, the banks, 17 banks who agreed that we were short in the rent for all these years.
Well, they're all claiming jurisdiction issues now, and they're failing to cooperate. I spoke to the commissioner. He says they failed to cooperate because they're claiming that the Competition Commission has no jurisdiction over them. But let's quickly talk about political will to deal with this thing, because it's going to take political will to deal with this thing. And in the end, it's really corporate gangsterism, isn't it?
Totally. Corporate gangsterism as well as a mafia operation. Remember, these are not individuals that just meet during the day. They have an after hours where they get together, and in those after hours get together parties and discussions. That is when South Africa's particular sectors are decided as to who's going to play where and how. And some of it, by the way, involves aspects of threatening competitors with life and death. Because if you're not going to come out of the market, you're not going to get out of the market. They're going to use aspects of the law where they will take you through the judiciary process, through litigation. And if they fail on that, they take you to a point where they can even issue out heats against you. That's what has been happening in this market. And unfortunately, this kind of information and truth never comes out and actually flares out into the market. But
why aren't these stories big in the media here in South Africa?
They own most of the media places. I mean, you know the owners of media today. It actually boils down to 4 companies that are actually controlling the entire media space. Apart from SABC being a public broadcaster, as well as one other, station that actually is an independent broadcaster, ANN7. You don't find the kind of reporting that is aggressively required, that addresses and deals with the fundamental issues. And we need that kind of media independence, journalist independence, as well as the ability to freely broadcast and speak about these particular issues. How else is it going to come to the public space?
With the same fervor, one would think, as we're following the Gupta leaks, for instance. Last week, though, the keynote address at this thing was delivered by Cyril Ramaphosa. Correct. He called this behavior immoral. He said it's immoral, the behavior that's going on. This legislation or evolution of the law that you talk about, what needs to happen in the now, in the medium term, and in the long term in order for us to deal with this problem?
I think the day we start seeing SAPS, as well as Special Investigative Unit, making arrests, that is the day you'll see the penny drop in South Africa, where there will be no longer just, investigation. It will go beyond investigation. It will say the facts are saying by Competitions Commission, SIU investigations, the Hawks are saying all of these things. And we're taking the drastic, decisive decision to start arresting individuals. And now you're talking about people who are corporate individuals, are highly, highly protected by the legal machinery and will not afford to sit in a jail time because they have enough money actually to spend themselves out of any particular saga. So we must start seeing the law take its own course. And we must start seeing our ministers take a decisive decision to say we're not going to be tolerant on any aspect of undermining South Africa's legislation, as well as the policies that we have in place, because they will never see any results unless we stop this particular criminal behaviors.
Shukran to you for joining us today, Adil Nchabaleng, the leader, the president of Transform RSA. We're talking about collusion, price fixing, and the monopolistic culture of doing business in South Africa. The worrying thing for a man like him, he says, is 80% of all small businesses that start in South Africa die within the first 18 months because of this kind of practice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We're going to take a short commercial break. This is Adil Nchabaleng. When we come back, well, we'll give you an update on what has happened. Actually, we've got news that's breaking right now, and this is around the SABC 8 now. All 3 respondents in the SABC 8 have now been ordered to pay the legal costs. Yes, the Labour Court here in Johannesburg has ordered the SABC former COO, Claudi Mutsuneng, and former news executive, Simon Tebele, to pay for the SABC 8 case where the employees were then illegally dismissed. We'll give you more details on this as it develops, probably at the top of the hour at 11 o'clock. Don't miss that. Should be interesting to see what comes out. We'll also try and get one of our reporters to give you a little bit more detail. We're taking a short break. Back with you right after this.
The Law Society has slammed notices sent to 4 universities to jack up standards or risk losing their LLB courses. The Council on Higher Education issued a stern warning to the universities to conform within 6 months.
I think it will affect the university. I think outside the law faculty, there's a funding issue.
It's been 112 years since Enoch Sontonga died as a relatively unknown composer, choir master and teacher. But today his legacy lives on through his greatest composition, Nkosi Sikeleli Afrika.
For all your news updates, stay tuned to Your World from Monday to Sunday.
Welcome back. At Newsroom here on SABC News. Now, over the past few years, the Competition Commission has dealt with close to 200 cases here in South Africa involving cartels. Of these, 33 were reported this year alone and have been referred to the Competition Tribunal for adjudication. This includes a case of collusion against 17 banks that allegedly conspired in trading the US dollar and the South African rand, and the excessive prices of even things like cancer drugs. I can go on, the list is long. At least 25 premises of cartels in the fresh produce, red meat suppliers and fire control business were raided this year. However, observers say it's not enough for the Competition Commission to play the sole role of referee, arguing that the Commission can have an impact in taking an active role, paving the way for an inclusive economy. Also, what punitive measures should be effected against those who transgress through collusive behaviour and price fixing? Well, to take this further, we are joined in studio now by Professor Simon Roberts, the Executive Director of the Centre for Competition Regulation and Economic Development, known as CC Red. Is that right?
We call it CRED.
CRED.
Yeah.
Oh, CRED. Thank you. Nice to have you with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Give us your overview. How do you view what is happening in our economy?
So we agree that the cartels are a huge problem in the economy. What we do in terms of our work and research is we say we have to broaden the debate, because prosecuting cartels doesn't create new competitors. So it's a bit like traffic cops. The firms can go around the corner and they can start breaking the speed limit again.
Yeah.
And they'll get much cleverer at doing it, and they'll do it in ways which will be more difficult to find out. So we also say you've got to look at barriers to entry. What is keeping outsiders out? Small entrepreneurs, black industrialists. And we're saying the focus on cartels is important, but where are the affirmative measures to bring new businesses in? And that's not getting into the debate.
How do we, 80% of businesses that start, small businesses that start in South Africa, are dead within 18 months. How do we stop that?
So we say that we found out that there's a number of dimensions. So first of all, access to finance is a big thing.
Yeah.
The problem has that we've been looking for one silver bullet. So if you give a firm finance, but they don't have the ability to reach customers, then you're wasting your money, whether it's development finance, whether it's supported by the government, wherever it comes from. So we're saying you have to look at least 4 or 5 dimensions as a total package. You've got to look at the routes to market.
Yeah.
You've got to manufacture the product, you've got to have the advice to be able to do that. You've got to deal with the competition issues.
Yeah.
If you're going up against well-entrenched incumbents, you've got to break those things apart.
Yeah.
You've got to look at how you can get patient finance, because it's a learning by doing process.
Yeah.
Firms that have succeeded today often failed, but they had the backing to pick themselves up. Is that backing coming for small black industrialists today? If you don't look at the total package, you're not being serious about this problem. And at the moment, I don't think we're being as serious as we need to be.
We've got these economic propellers that seem to play Father Christmas with money in and around our big cities. Why? Are they failing?
So, I mean, I haven't worked on the propeller specifically, but we have said that there are initiatives which are piecemeal. And like I said, if you don't put those together with the package, with the finance, with the branding advice, with the routes to market, how do you reach consumers, then you're not going to really bring all the different planks together to build the platform that you need for those businesses to succeed. Actually, just have a fair shot.
Yeah.
Because small businesses will fail. It's there's going to be failures. The question is whether we've got a fair playing field, and clearly, we don't have.
Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa delivered the keynote address last week at the conference, the competition law conference that was held here in South Africa. And he quoted Roosevelt in the 40s, what he had to do to unbundle the US economy that was racked by this similar kind of problem, and how it stimulated growth. Is that something that's doable here in South Africa, or do we need to look further at benchmarks?
So I think there is a diversity of experiences to look at around the world. There's the US 120 years ago, and it was actually farmers that pushed for the competition or antitrust laws.
Yeah.
So farmers were getting ripped off by fertilizer suppliers, by transporters, by fuel suppliers. So, we can look at those experiences, and the pressure from states where the farmers were big voters brought the competition antitrust laws in, and they did break up companies. Europe's taking on what they see as a big problem. So Google, for example.
Yeah.
For us, we're talking about challenges more at the level that you'd look at with the small farmers, small businesses, issues in the retail sector, issues with banking. But it's not a South African challenge alone.
Yeah.
There's a lot of experiences we can look at. If you're looking at what South Korea does in terms of monitoring their large companies.
Yeah.
They have large companies, and we need large companies. They're going to invest in large-scale production.
Yeah.
You're not going to have a small-scale steel producer. But the question is, how do those large companies behave with respect to the small companies to which they supply? So we've got to take this on, and I think we've been quite timid. If we're looking at the situation.
It's true, actually. We are being quite timid. But the thing, I've spent the last couple of years looking at this, and I'm very interested in it. But I get a sense that there's a real fear element amongst these larger companies of changing the way they work, because it seems to be the only way that they can think. Is it maybe an intervention that needs to happen within these companies to change their think tanks in the way that they want to operate?
So, I think this is where we mustn't be naive. Companies want to make money. If you have a small number of people in a market, 4 or 5 people, they'll try to collude.
Yeah.
So we can make this a moral issue. But actually, the way to stop collusion is to make it possible for other people to get into that market, to break the trust that exists. So we look at it as a South African disease. It's not. There are cartels all around the world. The banking, foreign exchange, price fixing, it happened in the US. There were South African banks involved, but this is not a South African question. It came up first in the euro-dollar cross rate, right? Yeah. Then we said, well, maybe you're also trading in rand. Then we found out that they are. So I think we need to think about it in terms of how a business is going to operate. And so you need to open up those markets so the businesses will then change and behave differently. So we have monopolies. They've got nobody to collude with.
Yeah.
The Commission has highlighted these issues. The channel that we're on, Pay TV, for example, in telecommunications. Some of them are also potentially state-owned enterprises. SAA has been fined twice for monopoly conduct. So I think we must really look at this across the board. The other thing the Deputy President said in the speech last week, which I think was very striking, he said the black economic empowerment policies we followed in the past may have reinforced this pattern.
Yeah.
Because the black economic empowerment policies, he said, meant that shareholders came in to the existing large companies.
Fronting.
Well, not even fronting. If you come in as a 25% shareholder, right, you come in, you get a seat on the board, you're 25% or you're a shareholder in the company. Then, of course, the last thing you want is for that company to not be able to make those monopoly profits.
Yeah.
Because you paid for those shares. So now you bought the shares, you're not necessarily going to want to have that market opened up. So this is a really big debate, I think, about what do we mean by empowerment, what do we mean by opportunity, because if you're going to open up those markets, then you're going to threaten the profits of the large incumbents.
The evolution of the law has been put forward as the roadmap towards nirvana in this case. Is it like that, and is it a simple, it's not going to be a simple process obviously, but how do we need to evolve this law in order for it to become a roadmap?
So there's a number of options on the table. I think it's important that in some provisions of our law, like the monopoly conduct provisions, the abuse of dominance provisions, our law is more conservative than the European Union law.
Yeah.
So we are already more timid, if you like, than the Europeans are. So we could be very non-radical at all. We could be very mainstream and still change our law. Then you've got laws which are more interventionist, which go even further, which talk about no-fault monopolies.
Yeah.
In other words, you break up companies through an inquiry process, which the UK has done with their airports.
Yeah.
So we're not talking about, we're not talking about things that may seem to be extreme in ideological terms.
Yeah.
We're actually not even doing the things that are happening right now in other countries. The UK's got challenger banks. They're talking about supporting rivals. Where is our strategy for challenger supermarkets?
Yeah.
For example.
You're telling me then that there's not the political will to do this?
Well, I think it's a question about where our priorities have been. I think this is where the Deputy President's comments about black economic empowerment were very interesting, because I think our priorities have been focused on areas such as on social grants, they've been focused on creating direct employment, and there's been a lot of discussion about the structure of the economy, but I think we've not been very willing to try different things out.
Yeah.
And I would say maybe that's a natural thing. Maybe the economy has to go through a process, and it takes a couple of decades. But we are, at that point now where I think there's a set of options on the table, and we need to really look hard at what they are.
You seem hopeful that we can do this.
I think we can certainly do it. I think we have to do it. I don't think there's a choice. I do think there is the one option is people leverage their ownership into the existing large corporations.
Yeah.
And that's one option. That's really been, I think, the black economic power route that we've seen.
Yeah.
The other option is to open up those markets, to say to people, black industrialists, you're on the playing field. But whether you succeed or not is also going to be up to you.
Yeah.
And a number of them will fail, but a number will succeed, and they will become the businesses of tomorrow. And I do think those two roads are quite different. And at the moment, we're a bit confused as to which way we're going to go.
Finally, radical economic transformation within this context. What is it?
So we work on the ground. We say, what does it mean in retail, supermarkets? What does it mean in transport?
Yeah.
What does it mean in food products? So we're saying it means bringing these different things together. If you're going to launch a food brand, you've got to invest in advertising. Where are you going to get the finance?
Yeah.
What does it mean in beer? For example, another company with 90% market share. So we're talking about real transformation steps.
Yeah.
I think we, as a country, tend to focus on these big headings. As a research center, university-based research center, we focus on the ground actions in sectors.
Things that affect lives, things that actually...
We think so.
That actually work. Prof, I could carry on with you, but we've run out of time. I'm going to have to call you back in the future a little bit to talk more about what is happening on the ground and what the picture really looks like and what we need to do in order to deal with this as a collective here in South Africa. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
That's Professor Simon Roberts. He's the Executive Director of the Centre for Competition Regulation and Economic Development, known as CRED. We're going to take a short commercial break. When we come back, Simpiwe will bring you the sports news ahead of the weekend.
What guides us? What leads us forward? Is it the words of our sacred texts? Is it the actions of our people? Or the voices of our citizens? Your country is guided by the voices of its people, and your broadcaster is dependent on your voice to guide it. Get your copy of the SABC's editorial policy and have your say.
Africa is constantly getting new technologies, and with that comes new terms.
Massive, open, online university. And primarily what they are doing is they're established in the community, so they're well established within the Soweto community.
Internet of Things also covers small sensors, so you can do like home security, motion detectors, IP cameras.
On Network, we simplify these terms for you. We also have new gadgets and social media.
When it falls on the grounds and then the battery, everything falls off, people just put it all together and then your phone is back in shape.
The Valega app, we initially started off by doing this manually.
The internet is actually my favorite fashion invention of all time.
That's Network with Ms. Pumelele Zondi every Sunday at 9 p.m. on SABC News.
Hello and welcome to your sports news. I'm Simpiwe Ngongane. The South African rugby team to face Australia in Perth tomorrow shows two changes, of course, to the starting 15 from the side that beat Argentina 2 weeks ago. Scrum half Ross Cronje is back from an ankle injury, and Pieter Steph du Toit starts at lock in place for Franco Mostert, who's rested for the Rugby Championship game. Now on the bench, Andre Pollard is back in a Springbok squad for the first time since the 2015 World Cup.
Despite the changes to the starting 15, Springbok coach Alistair Coetzee can call on two very established combinations. Ross Cronje links up with Lions teammate Elton Jantjies in the half-back pairing, while Pieter Steph du Toit is reunited with fellow Stormers lock and Bok captain Eben Etzebeth, who will play in his 60th Test match. Louis Diaga is on the bench. The Boks are full of confidence after a tough 41-23 victory away in Argentina, although they will be wary of Australia, who narrowly lost 35-29 to New Zealand in their last Rugby Championship fixture. Simon Burke, SABC News, Johannesburg.
To soccer now, there was no suspicious activity on the part of South Africa in FIFA's decision to replay a 2018 World Cup qualifier between South Africa and Senegal. Speaking at the announcement of a 4-year sponsorship extension by Sasol for women's football, SAFA President Danny Jordan said that they will challenge the ruling because the matter is purely between FIFA and the now banned referee Joseph Lamptey.
We will respond. We have referred the matter to our legal representative, Norman Arends, will respond. FIFA has made it clear that this has nothing to do with South African football. There is nothing that they have investigated or found in relation to SAFA itself. This is a matter between FIFA and the referee, and they have investigated the referee, and we will respond later after we've studied all the letters. We have received another letter this morning to confirm that, as from a FIFA perspective, there is nothing that they've raised against South African football.
All right, on to tennis now. Americans Sloane Stephens and Madison Keys, both struggling with serious injuries just 3 months ago, advanced to their first Grand Slam final at the US Open. US 15 seed Madison Keys, who has just left wrist surgery for the second time in 10 months after a first-round French Open exit, routed the US 20th seed Coco van der Weghe 6-1, 6-2 in 66 minutes to complete the first All-American US Open final since Serena Williams beat sister Venus in 2002. Stephens, who missed 11 months with a left foot injury before returning in July, outlasted 7-time Slam champion Venus Williams 6-1, 6-love, 7-5. The Friends and the Fed Cup teammates will meet Saturday at the Arthur Ashe Stadium in the biggest match of either's career. Well, the world's best marathon paddlers are in South Africa. The 25th edition of the ICF Canoe Marathon World Championships, currently underway in Pietermaritzburg, feature athletes from 27 countries. On to cycling now. Chris Froome rebounded superbly to increase his overall lead in the Vuelta a España to 1 minute 37 seconds with a late attack which left nearest challenger Vincenzo Nibali in his wake on 18th stage. Froome reasserted his dominance and edged closer to becoming the first rider in 39 years to win the Vuelta and the Tour de France in the same season. Well, Belgian Sander Army won his first Grand Tour stage by 31 seconds with a late attack from the breakaway group, dropping Alexei Lutsenko in the final 600 meters. Now, Fabio Aru finished the strongest of the general classification group, 9 minutes and 56 seconds behind Army. Well, Nibali could not keep up with the group as they approached the summit finish in Santo Toribio di Lebana and lost 21 seconds to Froome. Meanwhile, Alberto Contado closed in on a podium finish in his last professional race as he moved 1 minute and 17 seconds behind Wilco Kelderman in the general classification. All right, that's your sport for now. And Phil is standing by with your weather. All right, then before we move on to the weather, let's now take a look at the question of the day. Now, what are your hopes for the Boks against Australia this coming weekend? Send us your comments at SABC Newsroom. All right, now we move on to the weather desk with Philip.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, I know what my hope for the Boks is, that they kick the living daylights out of Australia. I think we all hope that. Let's take a look at what's happening with your weather for today. Of course, today is spring, so it's going to be warm throughout most of the country. And of course, that is going to result in the weather being quite warm throughout most of southern Africa. Expecting a little bit of rainfall coming into the southern parts of Africa as a result of cold fronts moving through the system, and indeed we're expecting high pressure systems to result in clear conditions through most of the southern hemisphere of Africa for today. Band of cloud cover and rainfall expected through the central to slightly northern latitudes there. That of course is where we have to leave it for now, but do stay with us here on the program and with SABC News.
What guides us? What leads us forward? Is it leaders on a soapbox, spouting rhetoric for the crowd? Is it the actions of our people? Or the voices of our citizens? Your country is guided by the voices of its people. And your broadcaster is dependent on your voice to guide it. Get your copy of the SABC's editorial policy and have your say.
From the moment you start your day. Good morning, everybody. It is 6 o'clock.
We are there for you.
You want a guarantee from the leadership that we should not be leaders who will steal? I'm prepared to give that guarantee that we should not steal from our people.
We bring your morning into perspective.
This is the reason they keep putting fees up. They're not getting enough money.
We'll make sure that you get the full story.
The police officers from specifically Moffat View Police Station, they support these brothels. What have you found upon your investigations on this matter?
I cannot deny those allegations.
And you can count on the weather team with expertise.
Join us live at 6 a.m. daily.
What guides us? What leads us forward? Is it the advice of our elders? Is it the actions of our people? Or the voices of our citizens? Your country is guided by the voices of its people. And your broadcaster is dependent on your voice to guide it. Get your copy of the SABC's editorial policy and have your say.
China and Africa, despite constant changes in the international situation, have always stood shoulder to shoulder, working together and supporting each other. In the 1950s and 1960s, national liberation movements swept Africa. The Chinese people, who had recently gained their own liberation, offered the African people full support in their just struggle against Western hegemony and colonialism. In 1956, China and Egypt announced they were establishing diplomatic relations. This made Egypt the first country in Africa to establish formal ties with the newly founded People's Republic. At the end of 1963 and the beginning of 1964, Premier Zhou Enlai undertook a tour of Africa, visiting 10 African countries in 2 months. During his trip, he set out 5 principles on which bilateral relations between China and the African and Arab countries should be founded. He also referred to 8 principles based on which China would provide economic and technical aid to other countries. His visit to Africa is still fondly remembered there today. On October the 25th, 1971, at the 26th United Nations General Assembly, the motion to restore the legitimate rights of the People's Republic of China at the UN was passed with an overwhelming majority. The announcement was greeted with enthusiastic cheering by the delegates of many African countries. Chairman Mao Zedong said, "Our African brothers carried China to its legitimate seat in the United Nations." Subsequently, as a permanent member of the UN Security Council, China has always spoken out to uphold justice for the countries of Africa. It has also defended the common interests of the African and developing countries. The African countries' support for China has not only been political. When China has been in need, their support has also been economic. In 2008, in the wake of the devastating Wenchuan earthquake, China received over $10 million in donations from Africa. The president of Equatorial Guinea even dispatched his foreign minister with €1 million to help the victims. This represented a donation of over €1 from every man, woman and child in Equatorial Guinea. In 2011, after the earthquake in Yushu in Qinghai province, the Republic of Congo gave €2 million to rebuild the China-Congo Friendship Primary School. And in 2015, Equatorial Guinea donated $4.9 million for building the China-Equatorial Guinea Friendship Primary School in Jinping County in Yunnan province. Thanks to careful tending by several generations of national leaders, the tree of China-Africa friendship continues to flourish. It has withstood the trials of the changing world and taken deep root among the people. Today, this tree is growing stronger. In the 21st century, the world faces a new situation and new challenges. The Forum on China-Africa Cooperation was founded so that China and the countries of Africa could work and develop together. In November 2006, a China-Africa Cooperation Forum Summit was held in Beijing. The scope and level of mutual development would be expanded. The unity among the developing countries would be strengthened. South-South cooperation would be enhanced, and peace and development in the world would be promoted. The 16 years since the China-Africa Cooperation Forum was founded have been a period of significant achievement. when China and the countries of Africa have stepped up the comprehensive development of their relations. Between October 2000 and June 2016, senior Chinese leaders paid a total of 166 visits to Africa. The more frequent high-level exchanges and the deepening of mutual trust have created a powerful driving force for raising the level of China-Africa relations. Notably, China and the countries of Africa have closely cooperated to promote the reform of the international economic order and to implement the agenda for sustained development by the year 2030. They've also adopted a unified approach to dealing with problems such as climate change and to defending the interests of the developing countries.
Yes, it's the 9th of the 9th of 2017. Remember this day? Well, a while back, the 9th of the 9th in the US. But today, the focus is on the poll. Deputy President Solomon Porto criticized big business for their uncompetitive behavior, calling their conduct immoral. And that's why we're conducting this poll, and we'd like to get your thoughts on it. Should those officials found guilty of price fixing and collusion go to jail? That's the question we pose to you. 92% of you are saying that yes, from the 214 votes that we got in, that they should go to jail. Only 8% are saying no. You're also tweeting us on the subject. Let me take a look at what you're telling us. This one from Monuke says, yes, with no apology, go directly to jail. They shouldn't get a jail card, says Monuke. John Smith says, why are we not looking at the overseas companies doing the current failed project consisting of the government ZA, billions of rands that's in there? Well, those are some of your comments. You can keep them coming. We'll read them as we continue, as we finish off this last hour. But the focus, I beg your pardon, is also on forming of monopolies by some companies here in South Africa and control of the market. And that's why we're asking you, how do you think we should break this culture of monopolies in the South African business sector? That's the question on your screen right now. Let me also take a look at what you are telling us in relation to the question. It's all about big business, isn't it, eh? Controlling the market. How do we break that culture? This one coming from Doc Moses Villani says, implement RET, radical economic transformation, without fear or favor nor prejudice. Level the playing fields. Punish the cartels in colluding his corruption, says Doc Moses Villani. Eric says the only way is to allow competition. Monopolies exist due to a lack of alternative suppliers. This also counts for SOEs especially. Now, those are all your headlines, but before we get anywhere else, there's also, of course, the sports question that we normally ask, and that's why we're asking, what are your hopes for the Boks against Australia this weekend? So, there you have it. There's a couple of tweets coming in that people are telling us what they think about the Boks this weekend.
Indeed, Elvis. Now, Vimbai K says, victory is ours, hashtag Springboks.
Well, he's very optimistic there. Tokosisi says, the Boks are warriors. They haven't been in their stride lately, but they surely are a force to be reckoned with. I can't agree with you more there. And those are some of your comments. You can please keep them coming. And some people are standing by to give us some of these headlines in a short while. But first, let's take a look at our news headlines. Now, news just in, the Labour Court to deliver judgment on who is responsible for the legal costs incurred in the case of the SABC 8. And as you heard, of course, former CEO, he is going to be the one to pay the cost. And Nigerian pastor Timothy Omotoso has been denied bail for a second time by the Port Elizabeth Magistrates Court. And police are searching for suspects following the torching of Uber and metered taxi vehicles. That was in Sandton last night. Right, and here we go. That's now time for your sports news. Let's go to Simpiwe.
Well, thank you, Elvis. Let's now take a look at the top stories making sport headlines this morning. And the Springboks will face Australia in a championship clash in Perth tomorrow at 12 midday South African time. And the SAFA vows to challenge FIFA's order to replay the 2018 FIFA World Cup qualifier between Bafana and Senegal. And Sloane Stephens oust Venus Williams to face Madison Keys for the US Open title. I'll have more sport action in about half an hour. So for now, though, back to the main desk with Elvis.
Thank you, Simpiwe. Top story this hour. We begin with a bulletin with this breaking news story. The Labour Court in Johannesburg has just handed down its ruling in the matter of the legal cost of the SABC 8. All three respondents in the SABC 8 case have been ordered to pay the legal cost. The court has ordered the SABC former COO Hlaudi Motsoeneng and the former news executive Simon Tabela to pay for the SABC 8 case. The employees, as you can recall, were illegally dismissed last year. Trade unions Bamao and Solidarity asked the court to hold former CEO of the SABC Hlaudi Motsoeneng and news executive Simon Tabela and the SABC as well liable for the cost. Now, the latest is that the former CEO of the SABC, Hlaudi Motsoeneng, will appeal the judgment in the Labour Court that he should pay the legal cost of the SABC 8. Moving on to other news now, Nigerian pastor Timothy Omotoso has been denied bail for a second time by the Port Elizabeth Magistrates Court. The magistrate denied the bail application, saying that Omotoso has no new evidence to substantiate granting him bail. Omotoso faces 22 charges, including contravening the Sexual Offences Act and rape. During his previous court appearance, he was also charged with an additional 5 counts of contravening the Immigration Act. Omotoso will remain in custody until his next court appearance in November. The National Prosecuting Authority has welcomed the judgment. Police are searching for a group of men after 2 Uber vehicles and a meter taxi were set alight in Sandton, north of Johannesburg, last night. According to witnesses, around 15 men believed to be meter taxi drivers petrol bombed the Uber vehicles. The vehicles were parked near the Sandton International Conference Centre, where the Johannesburg Art Festival is being held. Attacks on Uber drivers by meter taxi drivers who are complaining that they are losing business have escalated in the past few months. In July, an Uber driver died after his car was set alight near the Loftus Versfeld Stadium in Pretoria. The Department of Transport has condemned the arson, intimidation and violence between Uber and meter taxi drivers. Transport spokesperson Ishmael Mnisi says if the warring parties do not stop these acts of violence, it will suspend their operations and allow the law to take its course. Now, he was speaking a little earlier on Morning Live.
Once, but several times, indicating to them the importance of upholding the law, the importance of upholding the conditions of the permits that we're giving them. Because remember, when we issue a permit to operators, there are rules and regulations there, and amongst them is that they need to seize any acts of their intimidation and violence and operate within the confines of that permit. Failure for them to do so then gives us the right to withhold or to withdraw that permission, or to even officially cancel it if such an operator does not comply with the law. However, as we are saying that the room of engagement is still there with them, and it is at the point where we feel that such engagement have been exhausted. Now we then need to come with punitive measures to seize all the operations of these up until we bring them to the discussion table and this violence is stopped immediately.
Now, President Jacob Zuma is currently giving an address at the launch of the Invest SA one-stop shop in the Western Cape. Let's go there live.
We had an opportunity to see the areas where the center is, the one-stop shop downstairs. We started there, and I'm not sure whether all of you were able to go there. where we were able to see what is going to be happening in this one-stop shop, and had an opportunity to interact with the people who were there. And one of the areas we visited was a labor center-like. And I had a short discussion with them. And I was reluctant to ask, what do they do exactly? If it's a labor center, if I'm looking for a job, will they give me a job? I thought it would be rather a complicated question, particularly because the unemployment is a problem. But I thought I should share with them that in my young days, I was a young trade unionist in the city of Durban, and I was really making a point that the problems of economy and how the economy moves and the development is a challenge that is with us all the time. At the close of the 50s, beginning of the 60s, the global economy was changing. The cash word then was mechanization of industry. It was a big thing. And I was saying, as a trade unionist, we faced a very serious problem of workers who were being replaced by the machines. And it was a big problem. It was as if there will never be any other bigger problem than that one. We had a very strong union in a factory of one of the types of tea. I don't know whether it still exists, because we now drink a lot of rooibos called Joko tea. Very strong union. And it had a lot of workers who were employed, and they were packing different sizes of the tea and packets. And the trucks and other things that transported tea would stand outside waiting for a long time. And perhaps they will spend half a day, almost whole day. But when the machine was developed to pack packets of tea, the workers who used to stand along the huge tables were replaced by the machine. And the machines were welcomed because they were fast. The trucks and wagons that were taking tea away were moving faster. Less than an hour, the truck was full. So there were two important things here: the development and the efficiency of the means of packing, etc., which was welcomed particularly by those who do business. It was quick to deliver, etc. But the other side of it is that the workers who were working and earning wages had to lose the jobs. Whilst others were happy, others had nothing to put on the table. It was a serious challenge for the trade unions. This was many, many years ago. I'm sure very few were born. If I look around, I could identify just a few. Some of them, even their parents were not yet married. They had not discovered each other. The time has moved. Time has moved. It's no longer mechanization. At some point, people are talking about computerization of the economy. They've even moved a step further, if I'm correct. IT. I'm told you can stay in your flat and do a huge business. This means the challenge, therefore, to the workers is more. It's no longer just packing with your hands, but you have got to have skill, technological skills to catch up with industry. So the demand is huge. The changes are serious. So I just thought I should tell the story. I didn't tell it in this long-winded way. It was very short. I just said, look, I was a worker. I know how to strike. But during our time, we're being groomed to be good trade unionists. We would not call a strike at a drop of a hat, because the strike, we understood, was cutting on both sides. So you had to have very good reasons why you call a strike. And your strike will never be too many days, because you did not want the workers to feel the pain. But that's a different matter. I'm saying this because the acting premier, the MEC, was really giving a report about how the Western Cape has grown in terms of the employment, which is absolutely appreciated, because that is one challenge that we are faced with. A few years ago, we were in Davos, and Professor Schwabs was talking to me about the problem of widening gap between the rich and the poor. And he called it a time bomb. And my point was, what is it that we do to try to close the gap, if that is the case? It's a challenge to business, to governments, even to labor itself. But that's one point. On another very lighter note, more lighter than this one is lighter but it's real. Since I'm in Cape Town, there is a very small thing I always want to say when I'm in Cape Town. And Cape Townians know this, but it doesn't matter. I would say it nevertheless. Just like a pastor, every Sunday, reading Genesis to people who have read the Bible, who have preached about it, but the pastor will still continue because it's important to talk about the Bible. No, the premier was saying this city is absolutely #1, known worldwide. And that is all known. Cape Town, wherever you are, people say, oh, Cape Town. Oh, Cape Town. Majestic mountain on top called Table. The Cape Point where the two oceans meet. You know, there's everything to describe about Cape Town. Bear in mind, I come from Durban, by the way. I can tell you things about Durban. So this time around, I was in Uganda, in one of the African countries in East Africa. And at a moment, I was not busy. I was looking at this huge lake, Victoria Lake, with some little islands in it, green, mountainous. I was admiring this country. So I couldn't stop, I couldn't just keep quiet. So I say, this country is beautiful. Now there are Ugandans around. This country is beautiful. One Ugandan says, it is. Do you know why? So I say, I don't know. He says, no, the reason is that when God created the earth, Uganda was the last country to create. So God had more material leftovers in his hands. So he had to play around with it to create this beauty. I said, is that so? He says, oh yes, that's what it is. I said, okay, no wonder. Then that tells the story. He says, oh, of course, yes. That's why we have such a beautiful country. I said, no, thank you very much for the information. I says, okay. So he asked me a question. Do you know where God went after creating this last country? I said, I don't know. He says, of course, he went to stay in Cape Town. So you have, besides anything, the beauty, everything, you stay with God here. You just have to look where he stays. Maybe somewhere in the Majestic Mountain, in some rocks there, I don't know. Director of the program, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us on this important occasion, the launch of the Invest SA one-stop shop, Western Cape, for all investors. This important event takes place as we are all celebrating and welcoming the latest report, which shows that our economy grew by 2.5% in the last quarter, and that we are out of the technical recession. It indicates that if we focus on doing what is right, concentrating on supporting the sectors that can help us reignite growth, we will see positive results. I'm sure everyone will remember that when we were declared to be at a technical recession, people remembered what happened at some other point. It takes a year, it might take 2-3 years before we come out of recession. I think the time has been shorter, if I'm remembering very well, that we have went not to the full, but technical. Now the DG can explain better what is technical recession. DG of the DTI. Yes, more good news in that South Africa fared well in the recent World Economic Forum's Global Competitiveness Index 2016-2017, ranking 47th out of 138 countries. The report shows that South Africa ranked very well in financing through the local equity market, where we ranked first out of 138 countries. The same report shows that we ranked first when measured on the strength of auditing and reporting standards. We are also first on the protection of minority shareholders' interests. Second, of the soundness of our banking system, and third, on the regulation of securities, exchanges, and the efficacy of corporate boards. These positive results are echoed in the Brand South Africa International Perception Survey 2016, which identified a number of strategic areas for improvement by government in its investment promotion, facilitation, and aftercare efforts. Several private sector reports also indicate that South Africa remains the preferred investment destination on the African continent. We need to build on these positive attributes of the country. We need to work together as government, business, and organized labor to ensure that we sustain this positive trajectory, creating an environment where the economy can grow and jobs can be created for our people comes first for our government. Our people do not need jobs, they need to be able to put food on the table. Young people need jobs. They are sitting at home with degrees and diplomas. It is for this reason that we are focusing on creating the right environment for investments into the economy from abroad and from within the country. The economy must indeed come first to all of us. It is for this reason that we are establishing the one-stop shops to make it easier for investors to do business in our country, South Africa. For a long time, there have been concerns from the business and investor community that bureaucratic hurdles in the state make investing in South Africa difficult. The launch of Invest SA one-stop shop for the Western Cape province this morning is our concrete response as government to these concerns. This launch allows all of us to be able to say, in South Africa, there is a progress in allowing the starting of business to flow easily. This launch also follows on the footsteps of the launch of the National One-Stop Shop in March this year. There will be launches in other provinces in due course. The idea of one-stop shop is a simple one. All key regulatory and administrative departments and agencies are housed in a single location to provide an integrated service to investors. This is happening for the first time in our history. The one-stop shops provide a convenient professional service for setting up a business. The one-stop shops are very easy to use for investors. All investors need to do is to make an appointment with the relevant government representative at the one-stop shop to explain the services required, and the government representative provides guidance and support to the investor. From permits to water or electricity services, tax issues, licensing, it should be easy for an investor to get all these services under one roof. Officials at the one-stop shops are trained and briefed to provide such specialist advisory services. They are meant to help potential investors to find all services under one roof. Our intention is to unblock and reduce red tape in government. As I've pointed out, at all services each investor needs are available under the same roof. Key departments such as Home Affairs, Labor, Environmental Affairs, Trade and Industry, and agencies such as Companies and Intellectual Property Commission, SARS, Visa, and Permit Facilitation Services are available at the one-stop shop. This is not only a significant improvement from a fragmented service government used to provide before, but it also works. Since the launch of the National One-Stop Shop on the 17th March this year, we have seen a significant improvement in the overall investor facilitation and after services. If we continue in this direction, we will continue to see results and achieve the growth rates envisaged in the National Development Plan. The NDP envisages that the combined investment by the private and public sectors rise from the current levels of around 19% of GDP to 30% of GDP by 2030. This endeavor requires a concerted effort from government across the spheres, the private sector, and organized labor. From our part as government, we have established an interministerial committee on investment comprising of 18 cabinet ministers to oversee our overall investment policy, coordination and alignment, including the investment climate and marketing of South Africa as an investment destination. Government will continue to work hard to improve the investment climate in our country so that we can kickstart the growth of our economy. It is not only foreign investors that we seek to attract to invest into our economy. We also seek to encourage domestic investors to also do the same. Ladies and gentlemen, we are aware as government that investors, both foreign and domestic, as well as other business owners, share concerns about the state of our economy. These concerns include the continued slow economic growth, rising government debt, and poor performance by some state-owned companies and enterprises. We share these concerns. Are our concerns too. And we are taking steps to address them. We are accelerating the implementation of the National Development Plan because we believe that it is the only plan that will lead us to inclusive growth and help us create jobs. Noting the difficult economic conditions we face, I convened a meeting of the Economic Cluster Ministers at the end of June this year to assess the situation and to formulate concrete measures to turn the situation around. I called the meeting to also communicate to the ministers that we need to act with a strong measure of urgency. It is simply not sufficient to say we have the NDP anymore. We need to move faster to implement it. The meeting agreed on clear implementation timelines for the key structural reforms relating to the 9-point plan to reignite economic growth. The 9-point plan priorities action in a number of areas. There is an increased focus on industrialization, mining and beneficiation, agriculture and agro-processing, energy, small, medium, and as well as micro enterprises, attracting investments, growing the ocean's economy and tourism. In addition to this, cross-cutting areas such as science and technology, water and sanitation, infrastructure, transport infrastructure, and broadband rollout have also been prioritized. We also have a specific program focusing on the development of black industrialists as part of promoting radical socio-economic transformation. This initiative aims to expand the industrial base of the country and grow the economy through bringing in the majority of real productive sectors such as manufacturing. The economic cluster has produced measures to add impetus to the 9-point plan. The Minister of Finance, Mr. Malusi Gigaba, has announced some of these measures. Others will be announced when he delivers the mid-term policy statement next month. We should also accept that the challenges that our economy faces do not mean that everything is not working well. Our country is doing well on many fronts, and life is improving for many people on a daily basis as basic services are extended on an ongoing basis. We need to unite as South Africans and put our country first. We have added responsibilities this year as we chair SADC and BRICS. The eyes of the continent and the world are therefore on us, waiting for us to continue doing what we are known for as a nation that can find solutions to even the most difficult of problems. Yesterday, I returned from China, where I, together with several ministers and a South African business delegation, participated at the 9th BRICS Summit in Xiamen, China. This was an important summit in many respects. The BRICS partnership will be entering its second decade of existence next year. Since its launch, BRICS has made many strides, including the establishment of the new development bank, whose Africa Regional Center we launched a few weeks ago in Johannesburg. The new development bank and BRICS in general offer us an opportunity to engage the world and develop our economy on terms that are fairer and less hostile. The new development bank has started lending money for infrastructure development. All of us will soon notice the benefits of our participation in BRICS. I invite business to engage with BRICS by participating in its institutions and by forming partnerships with their counterparts from BRICS countries. Program Director, the launch of the Invest SA one-stop shop Western Cape is a significant demonstration of how government can effectively work together at all three spheres. The National One-Stop Shop will be linked to and support the provincial one-stop shops. Before the end of this year, there will be launches of one-stop shops in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng. Invest SA will continue supporting the operational functions of the established one-stop shops through effective monitoring and engagements. I urge the investment community to make use of these services and look forward to seeing the positive impact of the one-stop shops to inclusive economic growth across the country. It is through collaboration and alignment of action that we can add to this spirit of progress outlined in the NDP. I also wish to reiterate that we must unite as government, business, and labor and send one message of hope to the country. A lot of good work is being done. The launch of these centers is among the progress that is being made with regards to creating the right investment climate to create jobs. Let me congratulate the DTI, the Western Cape government, and the other stakeholders for getting this project off the ground successfully. The people of the Western Cape need jobs, and this project will help to achieve those goals. Let me also take this opportunity to congratulate the Mayor of Cape Town for the MOU that was signed recently by Cape Town and New York City in the USA, which is aimed at promoting tourism and people-to-people exchanges between Cape Town and New York City. Tourism is one of the key sectors for job creation. We need more and more tourists from all the key markets in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to declare this Western Cape Invest SA One-Stop Shop Center officially opened. I thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Let me start by thanking the President for gracing this occasion and also for providing strong, decisive leadership on this issue. Most of us, Mr. President, might not have been there during those days. But one thing that we know about you is that you detest government red tape. He has put all his energies in ensuring that this becomes a success. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Well, that's the president there opening up the one-stop shop. Meanwhile, the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal have, of course, are looking at the issue of the murders that's happening, the taxi violence as well, and they'll be taking a look at that shortly. But of course, we're also looking at your question for the day that we posed, as well as the poll question. There's a question of the day. How do we break the culture of monopolies in the South African business sector? And of course, we also ran the poll for you today, looking at how or should officials really that are found guilty of price fixing and collusion, should they go to jail? Well, that's what we posed to you. There's 214 votes in as yet. 92% of you are saying yes, they should go to jail. Only 8% disagree. And those are the 8% perhaps of the companies, of the CEOs of those companies. But that's where we got to leave it for today. Thank you so much for watching. It was a wonderful week. Let's hope that you have yourself a lovely weekend ahead. From myself, Elvis Presley, and the team, arrivederci.